The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 7th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
From there, Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice, but a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demons left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre, and went by way of Sidon, towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven. He sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The Gospel of the Lord. So years ago, when I was in college, and as we pointed out at the beginning of the service, that was a lot of years ago, some of my classmates and I, we were all going to college in D.C., went to see a movie. And we thought it was a really cool movie to watch because it was set in D.C. And having been there for a couple of years, we recognized all the buildings and the neighborhoods and the places where the movie was set. So it was kind of like being able to really envision yourself in the movie because you knew all of these places and all of these neighborhoods. I don't remember really what the name of the movie was, but there is a scene that I will never forget. It was some kind of a spy thriller movie, and the plot was something, it came to be that somehow or other the good guys were being chased by an assassin through the city. So as the chase progressed, we went past all these buildings that we recognized in D.C. They went through all these neighborhoods that we ourselves had been in, and eventually the chase moved underground into the metro. So as they chased each other on the trains, they changed stations various places, but finally the good guys saw an opportunity to escape. So as the train pulled into the station, they hopped off the train, ran up the escalator, and exited through the Georgetown Metro station and got lost in the crowds in F Street. And at that moment, all of us sat there, and it was like the lights coming on in the theater, and we all started laughing and going, "There ain't no Georgetown Metro station. You can't get there from there. How does this?" And it took me about 5 minutes before I could get over that geographic anomaly and get my head back in the plot of the movie. Because it's just like, it doesn't work like that. Now, I've discovered that one of the occupational hazards of being a pastor, and other people who have been to the Holy Land have found this also, that when you've been in the Holy Land, you start to have some of that same problem when you read the Bible. And today's gospel story is actually one of those stories. It is set in a town called, starts out in a town called Tyre. And Mark reports Jesus as being there and then deciding that he is going to return to his home base near the Sea of Galilee by way of Sidon. And on the way, he passes through the region of the Decapolis. Now, for most people, these are just a bunch of hard-to-pronounce names that you're probably happy that I had to read and not somebody else. And they're just places. And like people watching that movie I was talking about who didn't come from Washington, it doesn't matter where these places are and stuff like that. But when you've actually been in some of these places and you're familiar with the geography, it sounds kind of like this. Jesus left Washington to return to his home base in Richmond by way of Philadelphia. And on the way, he passed through the Outer Banks in North Carolina. I sit there and you go, huh? What? It can't work like that. It's like Jesus popping up out of the Georgetown Metro. So what probably has happened here is that Mark has conflated 2 or 3 stories and put them all together because the geography just doesn't work any other way. So the first challenge for me when I was reading this story was to get beyond the geography and ask, like that in that movie, what's the plot really all about? How are these stories related? And why did they all get put together? So the first clue actually is in the geography. Tyre, Sidon, the Decapolis. You know what these places are? They're all Gentile cities. They're all Gentile areas. They're places where certainly Jews lived, but they were outside of the comfort zone of Jesus and his disciples. They were places that they wouldn't expect to find a lot of friendly folks. Honestly, they were places that you would expect to find a lot of Gentiles, like this Syrophoenician woman who comes up to Jesus. We sometimes read that and we think, well, what was that person doing there? Well, they were in the middle of Gentile cities. Most of the people were Gentiles. And, you know, it's actually something that is really kind of disturbing to most of us to listen to Jesus have this conversation in which he is talking and seems to be buying into this ethnic slur that Gentiles are dogs. But he's in the middle of a Gentile city, and frankly, most of the people who were around him and his disciples thought the same thing about Jews. It's not a place where Jesus and his disciples would have, or where Jesus' disciples would have expected or wanted him to go. The Gentiles are not people whom Jesus' disciples would have expected him to pay any attention to, let alone help. And these places that Jesus was, Tyre, Sidon, Decapolis, these are not really great places to get good PR if you do something miraculous. After all, when he heals the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman, she goes home, she finds that the daughter's okay. But whole crowds of people don't go, woo, here's Jesus, yes, now we believe. It doesn't happen. It's not a good place for PR. And maybe the reason that Jesus is recorded as having gone to not just one, but several Gentile towns is to remind us, or to make us think about how Jesus took his disciples to places that would have made them scratch their heads and wonder, why was Jesus going there? Why was he going to relatively hostile places? And I wonder if part of that reason was that Jesus was trying to model a way of living and sharing God's love with his disciples. That he was trying to model a way of living and sharing God's presence and love in such a way that it pushes you out of your comfort zone. It was not, Jesus said, just about living your faith among people who share your faith already, who already think, oh yeah, we believe in the God of Israel, because that's what happened whenever they went to the nice Jewish towns. We're here to talk about the God of Israel, and everybody goes, oh yeah, we all believe in the God of Israel. We may not agree with you or like you, but we all think the same way. When they went to the Gentile towns, they were looked on as crazy people. Nobody believed, hardly, in the God of Israel. It was outside of their comfort zone. It was a strange type of geography. Jesus did these things in all these Gentile towns, maybe because he was showing his disciples and modeling for his disciples a way of living and sharing God's love in which you're willing to engage with people that you did not ask to meet. I mean, that's the thing about both of these people that Jesus heals or helps. He didn't ask to meet them. In fact, he's trying, at least in Tyre, to fly under the radar. He's trying not to let anybody know he's there, and his carefully planned schedule and plan for the day gets all interrupted. In spite of that, Jesus acts. He helps. He does something even though it didn't fit his preconceived idea of what the schedule was, and in so doing, he was modeling a way of living and sharing God's love for his disciples. And Jesus went to all of these Gentile towns, these places where he wouldn't probably get good PR because he was modeling something for his disciples. He was modeling a way of living and sharing God's love in such a way that you really get beyond caring whether or not you or your group gets lots of great credit and praise for anything that you do because God wants you to do it. Jesus is always more interested in people giving thanks to God for the blessings that they've experienced than they are about making him a celebrity figure, which is one of the reasons that Jesus always, at least in Mark's gospel, tells people not to tell other people what he's done. He doesn't want, it's not that he doesn't want people to give thanks to God for what's happened. He's not interested in being, the big celebrity of the day. All of those things, well, they sound pretty easy. They sound really good things to do, but I think they're hard. I think they're hard for everybody. And I wonder if the inclusion of some of these stories about Jesus going into these Gentile geographies is a way of him asking us whether we're willing to be modern disciples who follow Jesus in some of those similar ways. That is, are we really willing to be people who follow Jesus in such a way that we're willing to be pushed out of our comfort zone, to be able to live and share our faith, not just in the nice confines of our faith communities and our families where people expect us to be nice and loving and caring and stuff like that, but in places where people really don't care and really don't like us. What does that mean? Certainly it does not mean, like that clerk in Kentucky who thinks I'm going to share my faith by pushing my religious views on other people. But it does mean being willing to be and model God's love, God's patience, God's care when you're in Gentile territory. And for me, some of those Gentile territories, I thought, where is it that I'm really not sharing God's love and patience and kindness? And when I'm driving, because you know what? I'm driving amongst a bunch of Gentiles that should never have been given driver's license. I know it out here. You probably too. And maybe that's the Gentile territory where I'm supposed to remember that now is the time to model God's love and patience. Maybe the Gentile territory is when I'm standing in line behind somebody who clearly does not care at all about the people standing behind them. I am not feeling the love of Jesus deep down in my heart. Maybe that's you know where the Gentile territory really is? It's at my front door. When somebody interrupts me in the middle of something I'm doing at home and wants to sell me something, when my community clearly has signs that say no soliciting, I am not feeling like I am in a place where I want to share God's love and happiness with the person at the door. And sometimes what Jesus in the Gentile territories is doing is calling me to think about, when I'm in those Gentile territories, maybe that's the place. Those are the places that I most need to be able to be a vehicle of God's love and compassion. Jesus going into this Gentile geography is maybe calling us to wonder whether or not we too can follow him as modern disciples by being people who are willing to actually serve God at times that do not fit our carefully planned day or our preconceived notions of how this day is supposed to go. Because if you ask me, are you willing to serve God and help? Absolutely, you bet, I'll go help that person. I got a time slot Thursday afternoon. I can make it work. But if it happens like it's got to interrupt your schedule right here and right now, like the Syrophoenician woman busting into the house where Jesus is trying to take a nap, or this guy who's presented to him as he's just traveling along the road and he's got places to go, I know how to do it. I know how to stop what I'm doing and reorient my schedule. You know how to do it too. You can do it, I can do it. I don't want to do it. Sometimes what Jesus called us is to think about maybe we need to do it because God is actually the one who's interrupted our schedule and our preconceived notions about how the day is supposed to go. And Jesus going into these Gentile geographies is maybe a way of asking us, as his modern disciples, whether we're people also who are really willing to totally let go of getting credit or recognition for the things we do in Jesus' name that, we don't get any glory for. And I usually think that I'm pretty good at that because I don't like lots of praise. Oh, thank you so much. And I was like, no, you know, I don't really like a lot of that. But, you know, there are times when I realize I'm not totally beyond it. Because I've had situations where, you probably have too, where you've bent over backwards to help somebody out or do something, and their attitude is like, yeah, whatever. And you think, you know, at least it could be a little like, oh, gee, you know, thanks, that would be nice, you know, at least you get a little satisfaction out of somebody appreciated what you did. You want to have a little bit of that. And I like the fact that I can go and get things, I buy peanut butter and jelly, and I bring that stuff. Nobody will ever know that food came from me, nothing like that. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, but I think I can still write that off as a tax deduction, right? There's a part of all of us that wants a little bit of the recognition and the glory for what we're doing, legitimately in response to what God has called us to do. Jesus' actions, especially in these Gentile communities, were a way of saying, you know what? Part of following Jesus is about struggling each day to give up that stuff so that you can really be free simply to be a vehicle of God's love and God's peace in the lives of others. You know, today's story about Jesus involves some really funny geography, but it's not just the funny geography of the land. It's the funny geography of life that we all find ourselves in. Jesus calls us to join him in that funny geography of life as God's agents of love and peace in places that are outside of our comfort zones. Jesus calls us to join him in being God's agents of help and healing in time zones that we don't expect. Jesus calls us even to be people who are willing as disciples to transcend even the geography of our own egos, so that God's love and God's glory will be able to shine through us.